The show begins in San Francisco with Janet, who is at an amusement park with her young daughter Megan. Suddenly, Edic comes up behind her and tells her he can't find her husband anywhere. She gets angry at him because he manages to find her so easily, but can't find her husband. She promises to give him whatever he wants if he brings her husband back. Then she looks for Megan and realizes she's gone, so she frantically searches everywhere. Terrified her daughter has been kidnapped. Out of nowhere, two strangers attack and abduct her. When Janet regains consciousness, she finds herself in a hotel room and notices someone is watching her through cameras, which frightens her. She bangs on the door, begging for help so she can see her daughter, until she hears a voice on the other side. A man breaks down the door and introduces himself as Joe, saying he knows nothing either, and that he lost consciousness in New York and woke up here. They leave together to explore the other rooms and discover 4 more people: Charlie, Moira, Graham, and Victoria. We learn that all 6 of them don't remember how they got there. Each one had been living in a different city, and none of them had ever met before. This is their first time seeing each other. They all step out of their rooms and try to take the elevator to get out of the hotel, but the doors are sealed with magnetic locks. Joe tells them they need to trigger the fire alarm system to release the locks. Meanwhile, a journalist named Mark is investigating Janet's disappearance. His editor, Kat, tells him to leave that story to someone else because it isn't important without a body, and instead gives him a new report to work on that can run on the front page of the paper. Back at the hotel, Joe tries to set fire to a piece of wood, and he succeeds, triggering the fire alarm. The elevator opens, but they're shocked to see no one inside. They get in, ride down to the ground floor, and step out into the street, only to be stunned that the town is completely empty with no one else around. They head to the sheriff's office and find it abandoned, with the phones all disconnected. They also notice broken glass and that a shotgun that should have been there has been stolen. Suddenly, a man named Bill appears and threatens them with a shotgun, convinced they are the ones who kidnapped him, until Graham tackles him and they wrestle the gun away. They all realize none of them knows anything, and the abductor is still a mystery, but suspicion begins to grow that one of them might be working with the kidnapper, since Bill was the first person to come out of the hotel. Joe then decides to head out with Janet to quickly explore the area. They reach the end of the street when both suddenly lose consciousness and collapse, and the others think they've been shot, so they hide in fear. After a while, Graham tries to rescue them, but he too is struck and faints in a strange way. Terrified, the rest retreat back into the hotel. Meanwhile, Mark is meeting with Janet's mother, trying to learn anything that could lead him to her. It becomes clear that he genuinely cares and wants to find her. Janet's mother admits there had been problems between them, that they hadn't spoken or seen each other, and that she longs to repair their relationship once Janet is found so she can live happily with her daughter and her beloved granddaughter Megan. That night, a black truck passes by the hotel, suddenly stops, and out come the Chinese restaurant workers along with Joe, Janet, and Graham, dropping them off at the hotel entrance. The workers return Bill's shotgun to him and then hurry back toward the restaurant. It is then that Moira discovers the kidnapper has implanted chips in their legs, causing them to pass out whenever they try to escape the town. She reassures them that they are not completely alone, since the Chinese restaurant workers are also in the town. The 7 of them decide to go to the restaurant to learn more about where they are, and they ask one of the workers about the person who abducted them. He insists that he and the others know nothing, that their only job is to prepare food, and the group believes him. They sit together at a table, and when the food is served, they eat ravenously without hesitation. Afterward, they receive fortune cookies, each containing a cryptic message that no one pays much attention to, except Janet, who is horrified by hers. She lies and claims it only had a motivational message. After a while, the 7 return to the hotel and are shocked to find an employee there who introduces himself as Neil, saying he was kidnapped just like them and woke up that morning in the hotel. At that moment, Janet looks again at her fortune cookie message, which tells her that if she ends the life of her neighbor in the hotel, she will find a way out of the town. The next day, Moira removes the device from their legs so they can try to escape without blacking out. They all head into the street, tying Joe up with ropes around his body as he drops fire extinguisher tags on the ground to mark the path they take. Janet glances at her message, terrified at the idea of carrying it out and killing someone, so she runs desperately, hoping to find an exit from the town. Suddenly, she crashes into an invisible fence and is electrocuted until Joe rescues her at the last moment. They all lose consciousness, and when she wakes up, Janet finds herself herself back in her hotel room with burn marks on her face from the fence, though she doesn't understand how they got there. Joe comes to check on her and notices the door to her room is intact, even though it had been broken down the night before. As he comforts her, it becomes clear he is developing feelings for her. That night, the seven gather at the restaurant and begin to open up about their lives. Victoria admits she suspects her father is behind their abduction. We learn her father is the American ambassador in Rome, and they all come to believe he might indeed be responsible for kidnapping her as a form of punishment, though they don't understand why he would have taken the rest of them too. The next day, Graham tests the fence again and discovers that every time he touches it, he gets shocked. The group then begins to explore the town. Victoria and Moira go to a clothing store and pick out whatever outfits they want without anyone stopping them. That night in her room, Victoria suddenly finds a glass jar with a cocoon inside, placed on top of the same type of fortune cookie slip. This one saying she will soon receive a prize or reward for something she has done. At that moment, Moira comes in to talk to her and explains that the cocoon will turn into a beautiful butterfly in a few days. Victoria immediately suspects that Moira put the jar there, but Moira insists she never entered the room. She reveals that she was a psychiatrist before being abducted and offers to help Victoria cope with the depression she is experiencing. Janet goes up to her room and finds a gun on the dresser, along with a new note telling her to end Joe's life in order to escape the town. She becomes anxious because she doesn't want to hurt anyone. All she wants is to see her daughter again. That night, she sees the others holding Neil and torturing him to make him reveal the truth and tell them who their captor is. Bill says he has a plan. He'll make Neil cross the fence first, and then they'll all follow him. But Graham stops him, convinced Neil was kidnapped just like the rest of them. Suddenly, Neil runs and actually makes it past the fence. When Charlie tries to follow, he slams into it, gets electrocuted, and passes out. The next day, Mark meets his friend, Detective Gomez, who gives him a file with information about Janet. They learn that Janet had problems with her ex-husband, who left her while she was pregnant with Megan, and that he might be the one behind her abduction. Mark thanks Gomez and leaves, but is suddenly attacked by Edic, who takes the file from him, warns him not to dig into Janet again, and beats him until he loses consciousness. Around the same time, the group hears an explosion near the fence and assume it has been damaged, giving them a chance to escape. They find one of the restaurant workers' trucks nearby, take it, and drive away quickly. Their plan works, and they manage to cross the fence without trouble. Meanwhile, Mark goes to Kat, showing visible signs of being beaten, and we learn he is secretly in a relationship with her. He assures her he will drop the investigation into Janet's case and admits she was right to tell him to close it. Back with the seven, they ride together in the truck, happy to finally be free of the town, when suddenly they see a blinding white light ahead. Janet begs Bill not to stop and forces him to drive through it. On the other side, they are shocked to find themselves back in the town again, as if trapped in an endless loop. Hopeless, they step out of the truck, only to be greeted by Neil, who instructs them to return to their rooms until the next day. Later, Janet hears a phone ringing and discovers it's her daughter on the line. After reassuring herself Megan is okay, she speaks to her mother, but realizes her mother can't hear her, and suddenly the call disconnects. Furious and desperate, Janet decides she must end Joe's life in order to escape. She goes to Joe's room, but can't bring herself to kill him, so she fires all her bullets at the surveillance cameras. At that moment, the camera switches, and her location shows up on another new feed. A week later, the seven try to dig a tunnel underground to escape, and after a week of digging, they discover the tunnel is blocked at the end, and realize they can't get out of this town unless they find whoever kidnapped them. Suddenly, tear gas is released on them, so they flee the tunnel and make it back to the street at the last moment. Joe tries to revive Janet and bring her back to consciousness, which means they've wasted an entire week of digging and are back at square one. They agree to start another fire to try to disable the fence like the last time. Later, Bill goes to the supermarket and sees Victoria. When he tries to grope her, she hits him and warns him not to come near again. So he curses her, leaves, and tells Charlie what happened, saying he suspects one of them is working with the kidnapper. They tell Charlie to gather whatever he can so they can set the fire. Just then, the TV turns on by itself, and Bill sees Charlie on the screen killing his wife. Bill says he dreams about it every night, choking her with a pillow, which unnerves Charlie and makes him fear he's been exposed. The seven gather their supplies and set them alight, light, but discover that someone has already sprayed fire retardant over everything in town. Suddenly, a plane appears overhead and they hide. It drops a crate, they run to it and open it, finding 7 smaller boxes inside. Each person takes a box and finds gas masks inside, only 3 masks in total, which end up with Graham, Charlie, and Victoria. They return to the hotel, and Janet begs Charlie to give her a mask because she doesn't want her life to end. She just wants to get back to her daughter. Charlie tells her he wants to go back to his wife too because she's sick and waiting for him. Mark goes back home looking battered, and Edic is waiting in the office and threatens him, warning that if he looks into Janet's case again, he'll finish him. Edic takes Mark's laptop and beats him. Later, Janet goes to the supermarket and runs into Charlie, who hides his mask from her and warns her not to think about stealing it because he doesn't want his life to end. At that moment, they hear a loud noise. The door locks shut and gas fills the place. Janet collapses and is on the verge of dying, but at the last second, she manages to open the door and she and Charlie escape the market. That night, Moira plays the piano while Graham approaches her. He learns she had been in a psychiatric hospital after killing her parents. Her father had abused her, and her mother knew but stayed silent. We also learn Graham served in the Iraq War and feels guilt over things he has done in the past and present. He comforts Moira, clearly attracted to her, and decides to give her his mask. The next day, Mark tracks his stolen laptop to Edic's house. He sneaks into the office while Edic is gone and finds a photo of Edic with Ambassador Franklin, along with files about Janet and letters between Janet and her mother. He discovers Edic had been hired to track down Janet's ex-husband. Suddenly, an unknown caller rings, and Mark quickly gathers the files and leaves before Edic returns. That night, Janet sees photos at the restaurant of her mother with her young daughter and is shocked, unable to understand how the pictures got there. Desperate to survive, she decides to steal a gas mask and threatens Moira to hand hers over or else she'll kill her. Joe intervenes and urges Janet to calm down, telling her she's only reacting out of the stress of being trapped in the town. The next day, the 7 are in the hotel when gas suddenly spreads through the building. They put their masks on quickly and try to escape, but Joe stops them because all the doors are sealed. He reassures them the gas isn't toxic and that they're safe, but suddenly a poisonous gas begins to flow inside the masks themselves. It becomes clear the masks were designed to kill them, not protect them. The group helps rip the masks off those wearing them at the last moment, saving their lives. After a while, Graham goes off to pray, asking God to rescue him from this place. Later, Neil gives Janet a new fortune cookie, but she throws it in the trash, deciding to take control of her own fate and never rely on fortune cookies again. Around the same time, Edic goes to the police station to meet Detective Gomez, telling him he has a solution to Janet's case and that he's located Janet's husband, the prime suspect in her disappearance, whom she's been searching for over 5 years. Gomez is stunned when he learns that Mark is actually Janet's husband, who has been hiding all these years under a new name. The next day, Joe sees Janet holding a bee in her hand, admits he's afraid of bees, takes it from her, and kills it. Meanwhile, Bill is at the fence and notices Charlie throwing an egg at it to burn through. Realizing Charlie had baited a raccoon to touch the fence and electrocute itself. Charlie, thinking Bill is crazy, tells him to stay away and not talk to him again. But Bill ignores the warning and keeps following him back to the hotel. Bill hints to the group that Charlie is hiding a dark secret from his past, which enrages Charlie and leads to a fight between the two until Neil intervenes. Neil then reveals he received a message from his manager saying that one of the hotel guests will soon be leaving. Shocked, the group wonders which one of them it will be, fearing the message means that person's life will end. Meanwhile, Mark receives a call from an unknown person telling him to drop Janet's case if he values his life, warning they know exactly where he is and can reach him easily. It becomes clear this caller knows his true identity and that Janet was his wife. Back in the town, Janet meets a taxi driver who speaks Arabic and tells her he's come to take her away and help her escape. She doesn't understand him, so Graham steps in to translate, explaining the driver came specifically for her and that she can only take one other person. Joe decides to go with her, and Janet promises the others she'll inform the police and contact their families to save them. Victoria goes up to her room furious that the kidnapper chose to save Janet and leave her behind. She changes into a red dress, goes down to Neil, and tries to seduce him into helping her escape, but he insists there's nothing he can do for her. Meanwhile, the taxi driver pulls over on the road to rest when suddenly a massive truck slams into him, destroying the cab. Joe and Janet stand in shock at the scene and decide to return to town since they still haven't crossed the fence. That night, Bill approaches Charlie, and we learn Charlie is a wealthy businessman. Bill blackmails him into agreeing to partner with him on a project once they're out of the town, threatening to expose him and tell the others that Charlie killed his wife if he refuses. At the same time, Joe and Janet are on their way back to the town when they spot a cabin on the road. They go inside to rest, but the next morning, Joe wakes to find his body covered in bees. They had slept next to a hive. Janet calms him down and urges him to move slowly, and they manage to leave the cabin safely. They continue back toward town and once again see the same truck from the day before. They hide until it passes and then run as fast as they can to reach the town before the truck crushes them. Meanwhile, Mark meets Kat in her office and finally confesses the truth, telling her he just came from the police station where they learned his real name, Cooper. He reveals he was married to Janet and that they have a daughter, though he has never met the child because he abandoned Janet while she was pregnant and disappeared from her life. Kat is angry, feeling deceived, and tells him he's fired and that she never wants to see him again. That night, Bill continues pressuring Charlie to agree to his plan, but Charlie refuses, loses his temper, and tries to strangle Bill with a pillow before letting go. He admits that his wife wasn't sick as he had claimed, but that he killed her because he was tired of her stupid ideas. He warns Bill never to bring up the project again, or he'll treat him the same way he treated his wife. Joe is on his way back to the hotel while Janet breaks down, not wanting to return. He comforts her, promising he'll find a way out for the two of them, and they head back together. Janet asks him to stay with her that night because she's terrified. Shortly after, a new taxi arrives at the hotel, and the driver tells Victoria he's there for her. Overjoyed, she gets in, hoping to finally escape the cursed town. The next day, Joe goes into the restaurant and meets an employee named Tom, and we learn that both Joe and Tom are part of the kidnappers program. But Joe wants out because he loves Janet and doesn't want to hurt her. Tom snaps at him, urging him to trust the program and accept the consequences of agreeing to it in the first place. Joe insists he still supports the program and believes in it, but admits he loves Janet and doesn't want to lose her, then walks away. He lies to Janet afterward, saying he was just out walking because he couldn't sleep, when in fact, he had met Tom. Later, they realize Victoria is missing from her room, so they search for her. They find a body dressed exactly like her lying on the ground, rush over in shock, only to discover it isn't her. Meanwhile, in Rome, Victoria's real body is discovered in the center of a fountain. Back at the hotel, the group tries to help the new girl who has appeared, noticing tattoos that reveal she was a prisoner. Moira points out the track marks on her arms and says she must have been in a hospital. They decide to save her, to learn her story and how she ended up here. Franklin receives his daughter's body and grieves despite their troubled relationship. We learn Victoria hated him and resented him, believing he killed her mother, and she had refused to speak to him in her final years. Soon after, the new girl, Erica, wakes up terrified, attacks Janet, and knocks her unconscious. She then jumps out a window before Joe can grab her and runs until she reaches the fence, where she is electrocuted. When Janet regains consciousness, she goes to Erica, urging her to calm down and listen, but Erica refuses and insists on escaping. At the same time, Moira is in a clothing store when a television suddenly switches on, showing Franklin on the news thanking the police for safely returning Tori to him after her 2-week disappearance. Moira is overjoyed to see that her friend's life didn't end as she thought. Meanwhile, Erica is still trying to escape, and when she runs into Bill, she attacks him, takes his clothes, and disguises herself. Hungry, she goes to the Chinese restaurant where Tom serves her food, reassuring her that no one there will hurt her. Hearing a noise in his office, Tom steps away and finds Joe waiting. Joe confesses that he was the one who killed Victoria, explaining that the program's protocol forces him to eliminate certain new arrivals, with the program director deciding who must die. Erica eventually reaches the fence, and the 6 gather around to stop her. But terrified and reckless, she lashes out at Moira and breaks away, running back to the Chinese restaurant. Janet follows as they go through a vault-like door, but Tom locks it behind them and activates the oxygen extraction system, giving them only 20 minutes before suffocating. Inside, John desperately tries to break down the door, even smashing through the walls, but nothing works. Janet speaks to Erica, telling her she must survive for Megan, who must be frightened without her. She asks Erica if she has children of her own. Erica reveals she has a son named Anton, though he's never seen her because he was adopted when he was only 11 days old. She explains she had been troubled and homeless, unable to care for a baby. and Anton grew up with another family. Erica is visibly moved as she speaks, saying she wishes she could meet her son and introduce herself just once before dying. She shows the injection marks on her arms and explains she had been sentenced to death by lethal injection. But before the execution was complete, she lost consciousness and woke up in this town. From that moment, she has felt this was her chance to become a new person. Meanwhile, Joe goes back to confront Tom, trying to convince him to release them, but finds the office empty. Desperately, he works on the controls to open the door before Tom returns. Suddenly, Tom appears behind him, aiming a gun, ordering him to step away from the system. Joe ignores the threat, attacks him, beats him down, and forces him to open the vault door at the very last second. Afterward, Joe destroys the control system so it can't be used again, then rushes back to Janet after she's freed from the vault. Graham is puzzled that Joe disappeared and reappeared at the exact moment the door opened, and he begins to suspect Joe is connected to the kidnappers and lying to them. Meanwhile, Kat goes to Mark's house and gives him a file to help in the search for Janet, but makes it clear she doesn't want to see him again. She only helped for Megan's sake. That night, Franklin calls an unknown person, blaming him for his daughter's death and asking if the mission was complete and the program finished after Victoria's demise. The man assures him more sacrifices are still required for the program. The next morning, Mark wakes to a phone call from an anonymous voice, warning that Kat is in danger because of him. He rushes to her apartment and finds her tied to a chair. He frees her quickly, and they flee together. But two masked men suddenly appear and attack. Kat fights one off, while Mark tackles the other, and they escape down the stairs under gunfire. Suddenly, Edic shows up and helps Mark get away. On the road, Edic knocks Kat unconscious and hands Mark passports, instructing him to travel to Rome and meet a woman named Angela, who will tell him everything. Meanwhile, Erica returns to her room and calls for the elevator, which appears broken, until Joe steps out of it and it begins working again. She grows suspicious, convinced he's hiding something from the group, and warns Janet that he's dangerous to her and to all of them. The next day, Franklin delivers a speech at Victoria's funeral where he blames her lover Stefano for her death and tries to shoot him, but guards stop him and throw him out of the church. Mike runs after Franklin, wanting to talk, but fails to reach him. We then learn Stefano is a mafia boss. Even though Mike insists he wants to meet him to help uncover what really happened to Victoria, Stefano's men refuse, warning him to stay away from the boss and sending him off. Back at the hotel, Erica warns Joe not to go near Janet or hurt her, refusing to believe he was kidnapped just like them. Meanwhile, Mark realizes people are following him, so he and Kat run until they're stopped by Stefano, who tells them the boss has changed his mind and now wants to meet. He orders them to follow him. That night, Joe suddenly collapses from severe stomach pain. Janet helps him into the hotel, confused by what's happening, but he insists he just needs to rest and leaves her to take the elevator. Everyone watches in shock as the elevator carries him to the 6th floor, even though it only works up to the 3rd for them, confirming their suspicions that Joe is connected to the kidnappers. Janet, however, is too stunned to accept it. Meanwhile, Stefano holds Mark and Kat captive and asks why they've been chasing him. They learn that Mark's ex-wife disappeared the same day as Victoria, under the same circumstances, and ever since then, someone has been trying to stop him from uncovering the truth. Stefano asks for his help in finding the real criminal and avenging his lover. That night, Tom checks on Joe, apologizing for poisoning him, explaining it was an order from the organizer, and that he had no choice. He reminds Joe he had warned him several times not to break the program's rules. The next day, Moira discovers Joe has been poisoned and will die if they don't treat him quickly, urging the group to find anything that could purge the toxin from his system. Meanwhile, Mark disguises himself as a priest, with Kat dressed as a nun, and together, they sneak into Franklin's party. Suddenly, Kat collapses onto the buffet table, creating a diversion that lets her steal Franklin's access card. Mark takes the card, breaks into Franklin's office, and finds a photo of Janet, Victoria, and Joe together, leaving him shocked. He quickly snaps a picture with his phone and hides from the guards. At the same time, Erica realizes she can treat Joe's poisoning with vodka, but she demands he tell her the truth first, promising to give him the antidote only if he confesses everything. Joe confesses to Erica that he is part of the organization planted among them to participate in the program, which is actually a psychological experiment conducted on the abductees for specific purposes. Meanwhile, Mark and Kat are in a taxi when the driver suddenly pulls over and gets out to buy something. Kat realizes the doors are locked, then hears the sound of a bomb. Mark breaks the door open, and they escape at the last second before the taxi explodes. The next day, Joe wakes up recovered from the poisoning and finds Janet. She asks him if he remembers what he said, that he really was with the kidnappers. He admits he's part of the program and tries to explain that they aren't truly kidnapped, but she doesn't want to hear it and is devastated because she had trusted him. The following day, Joe, frustrated, sprays black paint over all the surveillance cameras in Janet's room, then apologizes for lying and promises to help her escape. Janet refuses to believe him, accusing him of deceiving her all along. Later, the two go down to the others, and Joe explains that the program is run by a powerful organization whose purpose is to analyze human behavior under captivity, hoping to advance humanity. He reveals the organization has been running for over 50 years and that they are neither the first nor the last group to be taken. The others are shattered by the revelation and attack Bill, blaming him for their situation. They decide to torture him for information about a way out, but Janet refuses and insists she still believes he'll help her escape. That night, Charlie sits with Joe and offers him any amount of money he wants if he helps him get out so he can return to his life. Joe promises he'll do everything he can to help all of them escape. The next day, Mark goes to Stefano and shows him a photo of Joe, trying to identify him. They suspect Joe might be the kidnapper, but they can't confirm who he is. Suddenly, they hear the police approaching the building, so they flee quickly. Stefano gives them money to escape Rome, then surrenders himself to the authorities to buy Mark enough time to get away. That night, Janet notices the lights flickering on and off, then hears Joe screaming. She rushes to the fence and finds Erica torturing him, demanding he confess. Joe proves he doesn't know a way out and throws himself against the fence, electrocuting himself until Janet pulls him back to save him. Later, she goes up to Joe's room to check on him. He asks why she saved him, and it's clear they are drawn to each other. Janet admits she doesn't know why she did it, only that he's her only chance to get out of there. The next day, Mark is on his way out of Rome when he's stopped by a mysterious man in a wheelchair. The man suddenly rises, pulls a gun, and forces Mark to go with him. They are taken to Ambassador Franklin, who tells them about the organization. He explains that it is the true power behind world events, responsible for assassinations and even his daughter's death. Franklin instructs Mark to travel to the city of San Nicasio to find a woman named Angela, the only one who ever escaped the program, and the only person who can help him rescue Janet. Back at the hotel, Janet finds files in Joe's room containing information about all 7 of them. Furious, she locks him in the sheriff's office until he either betrays the program and helps them escape or faces punishment. Meanwhile, Moira learns that Graham once killed people for money. Crushed, she pushes him away, heartbroken that the man she trusted hid such a dark truth. That night, Charlie sneaks into the cell, frees Joe, and urges him to honor their deal to get him out of the program as well. But Tom has been watching through the surveillance cameras and intercepts them. He points a gun at Joe, forcing him to come with him to the restaurant. Charlie runs after them to help, but Tom shoots him in the leg and drags Joe into the kitchen, blaming him for all the chaos. Suddenly, Janet ambushes Tom, hurling boiling oil onto him. He bursts into flames and burns alive before their eyes. Afterward, Graham admits to Moira that during the war he watched his friends die right in front of him. One day, Graham was approached by a man who offered him money to kill a bomb maker. Without thinking, Graham agreed, only to discover later that the target had simply been an accountant. Someone set him up to take an innocent life for cash. Meanwhile, Mark boards a plane to meet Angela and is surprised to find Stefano on the same flight, determined to uncover the truth about who was responsible for Victoria's death. Back at the hotel, Janet goes to Joe's room. He tells her he's going to take a shower because his back still hurts from the electrocution. Moments later, Janet notices water flooding out of the bathroom. She rushes in, only to find Joe gone as if he had vanished. Joe then awakens in a strange fog-filled place where he sees Tom. Believing he has died and is seeing Tom's spirit in some afterlife, he is stunned when Tom insists he's still alive and urges him to wake up. Joe opens his eyes to find himself hooked up to machines, wires covering his body. A woman speaks to him, accusing him of betraying the program. She reminds him that since the moment he joined, he became one of them and cannot walk away. She asks what makes Janet so special that he would risk destroying the program he has served for years. We then learn Joe has participated in the program multiple times, even greeting new captives himself when they first arrived at the hotel. On the other side, Mark arrives in San Nicasio and discovers Angela is being held in a psychiatric hospital where visitors are forbidden. He bribes a guard to sneak him in and sees that Angela is terrified to talk, noting the surveillance camera in her room. She whispers that he must go to the churro shop in the town square. There, he will find the answers to all his questions. Back with Joe, he begins to hallucinate, seeing strange visions of Janet and even Victoria, despite the fact Victoria is dead. Suddenly, Janet vanishes, leaving only Victoria standing beside him, gently placing cold compresses on his body. We flash back to the past, where Joe first meets the head of the program, telling her he is ready to serve the organization to achieve its goals. At the same time, Mark arrives in the town square and notices a missing person flyer. It's Joe. From Father Luis at the church, he learns Joe was once a priest, but vanished under mysterious circumstances. The last photo of him shows two men abducting him from the city, the same uniformed men who had attacked Mark at his home. Luis confirms the man in the photo is indeed Joe, but he has no idea where the Chinese restaurant is. Meanwhile, Victoria appears to Joe, urging him to give up his defiance and return to the program to prove his loyalty to the organization. Joe refuses, insisting the organization destroyed his life, and we see that Tom had abducted him from the church bathroom years ago, ending his old life and costing him everything. Back in San Nicasio, Mark returns to Angela to ask about the Chinese restaurant, but she suddenly breaks down, lunges at Kat, and tries to strangle her. Angela screams that the town itself is the program, and that if they can find the town, they can shut it down. Kat escapes her grip at the last second before orderlies rush in to restrain Angela. That night, Bill speaks into one of the surveillance cameras, offering to work with the kidnappers. He admits every captive was taken for a reason, for a special trait they possess, but not him. He calls himself a failure, worthless, and breaks down as he confesses that he used to smuggle prison escapees for money. Meanwhile, Joe, still hooked up to the machines, begins experiencing visions of both past and future. He sees Janet and Tom blaming him for destroying their lives. The program's leader tells him she believes in him, that he will be the one to change the world, and urges him to trust the organization so they can succeed together. The next day, Bill sits outside the hotel smoking a cigarette. When his matchbox blows away, he chases it past the fence, and to his shock, he crosses without being electrocuted. Overjoyed, he realizes he is free, but then remembers he has nowhere else to go and decides to return to the hotel. Meanwhile, Mark goes back to the hospital and learns from an employee that Angela has been transferred, but no one knows where or by whom. The man reveals Angela had been confined there for over 25 years, endlessly talking about the town and the program, blaming them for destroying her life. He warns Mark and Kat to leave quickly before anyone sees them with him. Bill speaks again to the surveillance cameras, declaring his loyalty to the organization, boasting that he crossed the fence but chose not to run. He returned because he wants to be one of them. At the same time, Kat encourages Mark to continue their mission, assuring him she trusts him and will help him find his ex-wife for Megan's sake. In that moment, they both confess their love for each other, unaware that the organization is watching them through hidden cameras. The next day, Victoria notices Joe has lost consciousness and quickly calls in the medical team. They shock him back to life, and during the process, Joe's spirit drifts outside his body. He sees them trying to revive him and encounters Tom's spirit, asking if this means his life is over. Tom tells him it's simply time to return to the program, then suddenly sends him back to the town, bidding him farewell for the last time. Moments later, Joe wakes up lying naked in the street. Janet rushes to him, covers him, and takes him back to the hotel. They discover he has no memory. He doesn't recognize them, doesn't know where he is, or how he got there. The only name he remembers is Tom. Hoping for answers, he goes to the Chinese restaurant to look for him, only to be told by the workers that Tom is dead. Joe grows furious, devastated at the loss, and it becomes clear he had deep feelings for Tom. The next day, Kat tries to find a new job to save enough money for tickets back to San Francisco, but suddenly, the police arrive and arrest Mark for allegedly kidnapping her. Soon after, Neil receives a call from Liam, a member of the organization, who connects him directly to the program's leader. She warns him about Joe and instructs him to watch him closely, sending her reports until another agent can arrive to take Tom's place. That night, Janet tries to talk to Joe, urging him to remember where he's been so he can help her escape the town. When she takes his hand, he panics. His body convulses, and he begins seeing flashes of the past. Overwhelmed, he lashes out, striking Janet unintentionally before fleeing the restaurant in distress. Meanwhile, Father Luis is at the border, managing to smuggle Mark and Kat out by hiding them inside coffins. They stop to rest for a moment, but suddenly a bullet strikes Luis, killing him instantly. Organization operatives appear on the road and open fire on Mark and Kat, forcing them to flee into the forest to hide. Back at the hotel, Neil tries to sneak away because he's terrified of Joe, but the moment he opens the door, Joe is standing right there. Furious, panicked, Neil begs for mercy and promises to do whatever Joe wants. Suddenly, Joe suffers the same seizure he had before attacking Janet and violently beats Neil until he kills him. Moments later, the others arrive and try desperately to save Neil, but his injuries are too severe. At that same time, the program's leader lashes out at Liam, furious that the experiment is spiraling out of control, and orders him to go to the town personally to make sure everything is restored to order. We see Liam seething with jealousy and resentment toward her, but powerless to defy her authority. That night, Janet finds Joe on the hotel roof as he's about to throw himself off. She stops him, telling him that doing so would mean surrendering, and that's exactly what the organization wants. Joe breaks down, saying he can't keep fighting anymore, that the memories torment him every day until they crush him. He prepares to leap, but Janet grabs him and holds on. In that moment, Joe is overwhelmed by visions again, and in a sudden fit, he nearly throws Janet off the roof instead. At the very last second, he pulls her back to safety. They return to the hotel, where the others demand vengeance on Joe. Erica even tries to attack him, but Janet defends him and strikes Erica to stop her. Meanwhile, Mark, still in the forest, reaches the end of the road only to find himself standing in the town. Stunned, he sees the same Chinese restaurant from Joe's photograph. Inside, he spots the Chinese workers fleeing, though he has no idea why, so he decides to shadow them to uncover the truth. Back at the hotel, Liam arrives and introduces himself as the new hotel manager. The group is shocked, especially when Joe recognizes him, because Joe had killed Liam before. Confused at how he is still alive, Joe learns from Liam that the organization is cleaning the town, and until that process is complete, they will all remain locked inside the hotel. In the restaurant, Mark watches the workers carrying body bags, confused and horrified, certain now that something is deeply wrong. Soon after, each of the 7 receives a Christmas gift, and every gift dredges up their painful past. Charlie's present is a newspaper clipping, accusing him of embezzling from his father-in-law's company. The continuation of the article with the investigation results is missing, enraging him, and he storms off to complain to Bill. Janet's gift is a doll she used to play with as a child, reminding her of how her mother used to beat her, and how she would hide clutching that doll. In the present, she goes to Joe to talk, and Joe admits he had once been a priest and had never been in a relationship, but Liam interrupts, handing him a photo of his lover Gabriella, shattering Janet's trust as she lashes out, accusing him of lying yet again before walking away. That night, Liam delivers food trays to the rooms, telling them this Christmas Eve is a special night. He later goes to Janet and shows her a video of herself as a child, running from her mother and hiding in a closet. He reveals the organization has been watching her for many years because she is special. As the 7 eat, they suddenly lose consciousness. Liam had drugged their meals. Soon, workers arrive at the restaurant and dump 7 bodies there. Mark, terrified, opens the body bags, afraid to find Janet among them, but realizes she isn't there. He notices each corpse is missing its thumb. To his shock, he finds Stefano among the bodies, still alive. Stefano explains he infiltrated the convoy searching for his beloved Victoria, and that he cut off the thumbs himself to deliver them to the police for identification. The next day, the 7 wake up, stunned to discover they are still alive. Janet, however, refuses to speak to Joe after his repeated lies. Moments later, the workers arrive to collect the bodies, but Stefano and Mark ambush them, knocking them down and stealing their truck to escape. Another vehicle pursues them in an attempt to finish them off before they can get away. Meanwhile, Moira sits with Graham and shows him her own gift, a scarf. She reveals it is the same scarf she used to kill her parents, still astonished the organization somehow knew such a dark, hidden truth about her. After a while, the operatives catch up to Stefano, and he decides to surrender so Mark and Kat can escape. He jumps from the vehicle, giving himself up, and the workers shock him before dragging him away. Back at the hotel, Liam hands Janet a phone so she can speak with her mother. Janet is shaken when she hears her mom's sad, trembling voice telling her she loves her. Janet immediately suspects it isn't real. Her mother never loved her or said anything kind to her, and she hangs up, devastated and in disbelief. Liam then returns to the surveillance room, fixated on Janet's image on the monitors, revealing his growing obsession with her. Sometime later, the 7 manage to escape in one of the organization's trucks, hiding inside body bags. They succeed in slipping out of the town unnoticed and race down the road, but suddenly the truck overturns, knocking them unconscious. Janet dreams she and Joe are escaping together, but she falls and blacks out again. Then she dreams of the day she told Mark she was pregnant with Megan, only for him to shock her by saying he didn't want children because he couldn't even pay the rent. When Janet wakes, she finds herself in a hospital and panics, fearing she's been dragged back into the program. She rushes to the window and is relieved to see she's in San Francisco. Desperate to get to her daughter, she tries to escape the hospital, but is restrained by nurses, sedated with an injection, and knocked unconscious. Meanwhile, Moira and Erica are in Morocco trying to stay ahead of the organization so they won't be tracked down, while Bill and Charlie steal a car and make their own escape. Mark and Kat, still together, struggle to find a way back to America. Later, Janet wakes again from her coma to find Detective Gomez at her bedside. She pleads with him to help her reunite with her daughter, explaining she had been held in a strange town surrounded by a barrier they called the Fence of Pain. She begs him to find the town, expose the program, and rescue the rest of her friends still trapped there. The nurses sedate Janet again, and when she wakes, she finds the head of the organization disguised as a doctor, introducing herself as Andrea Adams. Janet doesn't recognize her, since they've never met face to face. She tells Andrea everything she experienced in the town, explaining how she met Joe, fell in love with him, and how he sacrificed himself to help them escape. Moments later, Mark arrives at the hospital to check on her, but when he sees Detective Gomez following them, he urges Kat to run because they are being accused of abducting Janet. At the same time, Janet escapes from her room, running through the hospital until she bursts into a basement door where a blinding white light engulfs her, and she vanishes. Andrea then goes to Joe and shows him footage of Janet in the hospital, assuring him she's safe, but also telling him Janet has moved on, believing he is dead. Andrea begs Joe to come back to his senses and continue serving the program, admitting she has built her entire plan on him. But Joe refuses, determined to destroy the program once and for all. Meanwhile, Janet returns to her mother's house and rushes upstairs to embrace Megan. Overjoyed, she can hardly believe she's holding her daughter again. That night, the leader attends a meeting with the organization's directors, who are displeased that she has failed to keep the program on track. She insists she will restore everything. Afterward, she calls Janet's mother, revealing they had made an agreement from the day Megan was born that the child would belong to the organization. When the mother protests, Andrea coldly reminds her she cannot back out and ends the call. Janet, Megan, and Samuel then attempt to flee across the border, but Janet realizes too late Samuel is taking her back to the organization. She finds herself locked in a metal cage, where she also sees the ambassador imprisoned. The next day, Janet wakes in an unfamiliar room, finds a key in a drawer, and notices surveillance cameras everywhere. When she steps out, she sees the new participants of the program gathered, with Mark among them. Together, they all descend to the ground floor, only to be shocked when Victoria appears before them alive, introducing herself as the new hotel manager. She tells them they've already passed this phase and are moving immediately to the next level. They step into the elevator and emerge on a ship in the middle of the sea, where the second stage of the program is about to begin.